Young. Welcome to this week's Ticker Work, our inaugural episode, of course. While many workers returning to life as normal right around the country, Victoria in a prolonged state of shutdown. Many workers have been out of office since March with no sign of returning anytime soon offer. We often talk about the future of work, but everything we have been talking about, of course, has drastically changed. We were talking about perhaps AI taking over in 5 to 10 years, the banks sacking thousands of workers in 5 to 10 years. Well, it happened this year. In this series, we want to uncover the pathway out, what workers can do, what employees need to know as well, and to discuss the trends that we are seeing right across the nation. There is so much data coming out. We're going to talk about it. Joining me now is Ahron from Corporate Dojo, the host of Black Belt Leader right here on Ticker. How are you doing?
I'm well, thank you.
So much to get through, of course. What do you think work is looking like at the moment? Because we are a country with many different ways of people working right now.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Even across our client group, whether they're in Victoria or not, around the country, there's still loads of people working from home. Obviously that's assuming if they were previously in an office. There's some workplaces where they've got reduced crews back in the organisation and working in shifts. And of course, there are people who are still not able to work because their workplace is completely closed still.
So the nature of work will change, no doubt. Let's talk about office jobs because that is the place to begin. We saw this interesting story that came out yesterday where Deloitte workers were told a few months back to take a pay cut because it would help them to avoid job cuts. Guess what? This week, 700 staff lose their jobs. Now, you might say that in ordinary times, that's about loyalty. It's a breakdown of trust, but these obviously aren't ordinary times. And I think that there will be businesses out there that certainly were trying to do the right thing, but the circumstances just keep changing. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I think employers are still wise to be compassionate and to communicate, with their teams and give them as much insight as possible to their reality. But the truth is, as you pointed out, that some businesses are needing to make those changes just in order to survive and to get through this period. Hopefully those businesses will be staying in touch with those people and hopefully as times improve, we'll be opening up opportunities again. But, again, there's no doubt that those decisions are challenging for many, but what's key is that we are compassionate and, honest with people.
We often talk about, you and I, about employers being transparent with their staff, of course, but it really is a two-way street, isn't it? A lot of businesses become corporate because unfortunately they've had a few bad apples that mean that they find being transparent to be too much of a risk. What do you think of that?
Yeah, again, my advice would be to make sure that we're not operating for the exceptions amongst our team. My experience, the vast majority of people are good people who have good intentions and if treated fairly, treated with respect, will strive to do the right thing. Clearly there's going to be exceptions around that. But what I'd also say is, in my experience, when there's an absence of information, when leaders are keeping their cards very close to their chest, it's more likely to inspire people to try and fill in the gaps and to determine for themselves what's going on. And that only fuels the rumours, it fuels the anxiety, the concerns. So whilst it may feel dangerous, if you like, to let people, risky to let people know what's really going on, again, if we do give people the opportunity to do the right thing, most people do.
It's interesting the behavioural changes that we must be seeing at the moment, given that people are working from home predominantly, they're separated from each other, of course. It must be changing a lot of HR issues as well, the way that people interact with each other, very different to around the office and things too. Are you seeing anything like that?
Oh, absolutely. For example, even just making sure that we're onboarding new staff effectively is a whole new challenge. But also just dealing with, for example, performance challenges or, having the coaching conversations that are, more difficult even when we're face to face.
Yeah.
A lot of those conversations, I'm observing leaders, putting a holding pattern around that and just hoping that, when we get the opportunity to be back in the office, we'll deal with it then. But the reality is, as we're saying, we don't know when this is going to end. And continuing to deal with those challenges is essential, but clearly, especially challenging for a lot of leaders.
The COVID feels like, let's talk about it from a workplace standpoint, right? It feels like workplaces have been in this really long divorce proceedings or bad relationship for quite some time, right? Rents are becoming out of control for many businesses, both commercially and also retail. The cost of doing business, of running a business, extremely high. So many things have come forward that obviously businesses are looking and saying, we have to have certain scales. So they've been buying each other out, etc., which it takes away a lot of that heart, which then leads to a divide within businesses too. When I talk about that divorce, it feels like COVID's come along and essentially is the mistress, which has hurried up the entire process, right? It's basically brought forward all of the things that we've been talking about, that we've been thinking about, and it's happened at once.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Again, a lot of the conversations I'm having with leaders is, a lot of what we're dealing with now is not new. It's just amplified and sped up, as you pointed out. Again, when leaders ask me, well, what are the most important ingredients to leading my team through this time? It's actually the back to basics stuff that works. It is about, again, as we're saying, great communication, staying connected, building trust, making sure that we're very clear with people, we're providing that coaching, we're holding them accountable. So all of those things remain important, as do making sure that we're operating our businesses in ways that are lean, that we don't have excess or waste, or we're not carrying challenges that really we should be dealing with. So for a lot of our clients, they're realizing that they can't afford to tolerate some of those things anymore. They need to actually deal with it in order for them to survive, in order for them to be profitable and to be able to, exist into the future. They need to deal with those things now.
Yeah, it's not a good time to be a difficult employee. And it's also not a good time to be a business which is operating on favors. It's about having that stability and certainty that you can carry on both for your team, but also for others. One thing that we're going to see on the other side of this is a whole lot of stress which is being placed on frontline workers, things like banks. Macquarie's boss last night talking about how concerned he is about the stress for his employees, that many of them will never have seen a situation where so many people are calling, as the moratorium, of course, ends on banks where they've allowed people to take longer to pay back their loans and things. As JobKeeper comes to an end, as that comes to an end, as things like insolvency protections come to an end, the moratoriums come to an end, it's really going to place a whole lot of pressure on workers at a time where many of them still aren't allowed back in the office. So it's not like we can notice that a colleague of ours isn't perhaps as chirpy when they walk through the door as they usually are. Everyone's quite isolated, and they're going to be dealing with really, really challenging emotional situations.
Absolutely agree. And, I think it's essential that clearly leaders, but also individuals are very mindful around their own mental health and that of the people around them. Again, as you pointed out, when we're in the office, it's a little easier to observe if people are a little different or they seem to be struggling. But now we need to be deliberate in asking the question, how are you traveling? And
well, it's like, are you okay days now every day, isn't it? It's just ringing people out of the blue and making sure that they're okay. I mean, my Facebook over the weekend on Saturday actually lit up with people, and I've never seen these people have any sign of mental health before. But three people posted about how they were thinking of ending it all on Saturday night. And I don't even know some of these people. It was like getting in touch and just saying, and everyone got in touch with them. It wasn't just me, of course. Everybody was checking in on them, making sure that they're okay. But people are feeling isolated and feeling very alone. And it takes us back to some of the huge human tragedies of the past where there wasn't any government support. We're kind of in this world now where we expect the government to be able to assist us. But this is of a magnitude, a scale that's so large, so big, that inevitably it can't be one government worker to every person in society to help them. There's going to be a lot of self-care. It reminds me of the story that following the Hiroshima attack, the Japanese government wouldn't help any of the workers because they didn't want to acknowledge that there'd been an attack. It took 10 years for the Japanese government to actually give any of the people who'd been injured and survived Hiroshima a pension. They had to survive on their own. And we think about what we're going through now, and the perspective, of course, is important, but it's really on a completely different scale. And it reminds us that as humans, we've been through even tougher situations than where we are now.
Yeah, that's right. It is, in my experience, it's essential that we are looking out for one another. There's that broader community support, as you've pointed out, but also as individuals that we do put our hand up, that we are asking for the help that we need. Because, again, whilst, it can be very difficult to ask for that support, there is support out there. There are organisations, whether they're government, provided or not-for-profits and other organisations that provide great support to people when they need it. And I'm certainly someone who's experienced that myself, getting to a place where it's just too hard, or it feels like it's just too hard. And, again, when I've had the courage to let people around me know that that's where I'm at, I have always found that the vast majority step up and step in, and they care and they reach out. So, I'd encourage all of us to speak up, and I would encourage all of us to look up and look around, where are people at and how are they coping?
And we think of HR managers as well, don't we, at a time like this too, who are going to be overwhelmed. Usually there's one HR manager at a company, quite often at a corporation as well. Quite often small and medium businesses don't have anyone in that situation, and the person they talk to is the person leading the business too, and that could be tricky. Just give us, we've only got about 30 seconds left, give us a bit of an idea of a trend that you're seeing in a couple of words right now.
I just think we're going to end up in a place where we don't march back into the office. I think we're going to have a blended future where there's some time in the office and some time working remotely, I think is where for many businesses we're going to land.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, really appreciate your time, of course, and fantastic to get your insights on all this, because there is so much going on. Karen Gately, appreciate your time. See you again later on with Black Belt Leader. That is this week's Ticker Work. You can catch it on the app or the website. Subscribe to our YouTube page as well. Just search for Ticker and you'll find us. I'm Ahron Young. See you soon.
Stream us live on the Ticker app, Apple TV, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube and tickertv.com.au. Ticker, streaming news now.